What up, what up? Salvador Briggman here. Hope you're having a killer week. You're getting tons of productivity fit in to your week and you're taking action. If you're taking action, man, you know that I am going to be proud of you. The one thing that I think just kind of derails everyone, myself included, like I totally fall into this category, is just thinking too much, right? Thinking too much, that analysis paralysis, where you have that idea and you're like, oh, it's amazing and so intricately laid out in my mind and I have all these great plans, and then months go by and you literally took no action, right? I've done this in different areas of my life for sure. And I think it's one of those things where sometimes really smart people, and like obviously if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably a smart person, you're educating yourself, you're doing the right stuff, right? Really smart people sometimes have difficulty when it comes to pulling the trigger or committing or really just buckling down and being willing to absorb a little bit of risk, because risk is something that's always a little bit uncertain and it's something that can give you anxiety. And you're like, I don't know the path ahead, man. I'm not sure what's all around the other bend there, right? So my role in this process, and make no mistake about it, this is a process. It's predictable. That's why I wrote the book, The Kickstarter Launch Formula. It is a formula, right? I talk about it in my mastermind, Smash Your Kickstarter Goal, right? This is a formula. It's a repeatable process. It's no different than any other process that's out there. What I view my role as is kind of telling you what's the next step there, right? And like for you to, when you go around that bend, you at least know what's waiting for you there. And you know what you got to do in putting one foot in front of the other. And you also hear from some other people that are on the other side. You know, think about this almost as like you're trying to cross a moat, okay? And you got other people on the other side of the moat, right? And there's this fog maybe on the other side. You can't really see it too well. There's this fog that's covering the moat. But you can see on the other side, you can hear people laughing. You can hear people having fun, right? And you can even see people every once in a while just having a killer epic time. And that's kind of what I try to do with this show, is I just try to show you other people that have made it to the other side, that have run successful campaigns, and that are also doing it repeatedly. Like today's guest has done a ton of campaigns, man. I'm talking about like 6 campaigns. That's a lot. And doing them repeatedly, I think also just kind of seasons you as what works and what doesn't when it comes to a Kickstarter or with e-commerce in general. So my role is not only to show you this is possible, that other people are doing it, that they're enjoying the process, they're making money at it, right? They're able to have profitable experiences there, but also I think that when you surround yourself with those kinds of voices and those primary sources of information, it just makes, in general, you have more accurate view of the world. Like if you just took my word for it, of course, you're going to have my slant, my skew, and Sal's always like a little bit kind of hypey. And I like to talk about opportunity. Like that gets me just so excited. I love it when there's opportunity in the air, right? And like, I just want to seize it. I want to attack it. I want to move forward, advance. I have ambition, but that's also not everyone is like that. Some people are different. So the goal with the show is to bring on different voices. And if you do like this, if you like this podcast and the way that I'm doing it, and today we're talking about Kickstarter and how this creator has actually raised, now I'm looking at this over $500,000 with their campaign. If you like this, you'll totally love my audiobook, The Kickstarter Launch Formula. So I put that together, very serious book, really important. I tried to cram as much information as I could into that, and I also try to make it succinct and not really that like MBA, finance, corporate style of speaking where they throw out jargon like net operating profit and gross rent multiplier and like all these big terms that you might not understand, depreciation, amortization, right? And it can just give you this massive headache. I try to boil it down into really simple, easy to understand terms and relate that to what that means for you and just make it simple, right? So if you like that, go and check out this link, crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio. That's crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio, crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio. But if you want to work with me or book a call, I'm going to share a way to do that at the end of this podcast. But that being said, let's dive right in and learn how this creator absolutely smashed their goal on Kickstarter. It's coming up. Hey guys, welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. Today we have a 6-figure Kickstarter campaigner on the show who's also launched a bunch of other campaigns and has been in the game since 2012. This current campaign is called Cthulhu Classic. This is a box collection of Chaosiums, classic Call of Cthulhu products back from the 1980s. We have the creator today on the show. Rick, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here, Salvador. Thanks for having me on.
Definitely, man. You've been at it a while here. You've been cranking out projects. It's exciting. Maybe you could tell listeners just a bit about your history leading up to this launch today.
I started playing Chaosium role-playing games back in the very late 70s as a teenager. And I kind of grew up with the company. And over time, I started developing relationships with people who were running the company. And when they wanted to have some management change in 2015, they've jokingly said, "We'd love to have somebody like you involved in the company, but we don't think you'd quit your day job." And actually, I did. And so I joined Chaosium in 2015. But as you said, I've had Kickstarters going back to 2012. And I've always been a big role playing games person ever since my teenage years, as I said. And one of the things I just noticed over time is that a lot of things from many decades ago were out of print and became quite collectible. And I don't like having people not get access to older gaming material by having it be out of print. And so a lot of our Kickstarter campaigns have been about bringing material that's been out of print for decades back into people's hands at a reasonable price.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. It's also one of those things where when you have had an experience with a previous game or character, and it's like the next generation isn't going to be able to experience that, it's almost like feels like a loss, kind of. So I can totally relate with that. When it comes to this project, do you think you could kind of describe to listeners a bit about what's it like for those that aren't, that doesn't have it in front of them? Can you just describe the project a bit?
Oh, absolutely. Call of Cthulhu is undergoing its 40th anniversary this year because it was first launched in 1981, right after Halloween, dark and rainy day. The game showed up in the Chaosium warehouse out in San Francisco, and it was a game changer, quite frankly, of a game because a lot of role playing games were all about accumulating wealth and power, greatly increasing in power, powerful spells, and all that. But in Call of Cthulhu, you're playing regular people in the 1920s is the most common setting. And because it's about cosmic horror and great powers, you're up against things that are way more powerful than you. You're very fragile. Usually you don't get any healthier. You don't get any stronger. You're just trying to figure out why all these odd horrors are happening around you in your community and so on. And so it was very different for a role playing game. I was very fortunate that in 1981, when it came out, my game master, Tim, brought home that 2-inch box set of Call of Cthulhu, and we started playing it, and we played it for months and months and months. And we only stopped playing it because Chaosium came out with another game called Stormbringer, and we switched over to that game. But Call of Cthulhu, that early edition, it's something that a lot of people would love to get their hands on, but the first several editions were boxed, and then boxes became kind of too expensive, and so they went to hardcover books, and those early supplements became very collectible.
Kind of bringing this to Kickstarter, like what was the decision there? Because you could have obviously produced this independently, or you guys could have spun this off in a different way. Like what made you decide to go to the audience there?
A couple of reasons, including we wanted to make it an event. And so for our 40th anniversary, we wanted to bring back this classic material, and we knew that Kickstarter would help us reach a wider audience. It kind of focuses everybody in one place on the Kickstarter website, and we have our social media directing people to it. And so we've had some bad experiences with Kickstarter in the past where Chaosium didn't really understand what they were doing fully enough. And when I first came on, one of my first tasks was correcting those type of mistakes and not repeating them and fulfilling Kickstarters that overpromised and underdelivered and were very delayed. But still, Kickstarter is a wonderful medium for, as I said, bringing a community together, having an event, and we wanted to do that for the 40th anniversary.
So you're almost kind of like the change agent, kind of coming into the company there with your experience there, at least with crowdfunding.
Well, I had run, before I joined Chaosium, 2 Kickstarters. And my first Kickstarter in 2012 was the Guide to Glorantha, and it raised $260,000, which was way more than my business partner and I expected to raise. And we learned a lot from that first, especially in terms of fulfillment and managing stretch goals and all that. And it was successful. And then our next Kickstarter was RuneQuest Classic, which is very similar to Call of Cthulhu Classic, even by the name itself, where it was bringing back into print material that had been out of print for about 30 years. And once again, it was a successful campaign. That one raised over $200,000. And the thing is, we had run these campaigns, we delivered all the rewards pretty much as expected, and a high quality product. And it's one of the reasons that Chaosium brought me on board, was to sort out 2 of their problematic Kickstarters, which were ongoing at the time.
I love it, man. And I'm sure you've read a lot of the articles online, like the basics of Kickstarter and what you got to do. Is there something you can tell us from doing those two campaigns, maybe that not a lot of creators reveal, right, about doing a project, whether it's advice on the fulfillment side, which seems like you got that down squarely, it sounds, or on the marketing side? Is there something you kind of learned from those two experiences that you could pass on?
Well, I know the biggest thing that I learned from the Guide to Glorantha Kickstarter, our first Kickstarter, was that we got too caught up in the moment during the Kickstarter. We were on there probably too much every day. And you wake up early, you go to bed late, you're spending all your time on the Kickstarter, going through the comments, trying to absorb it all. And we got too caught up with stretch goals that were very close together. It's like, hey, we just raised another $10,000 and we didn't think we'd raise that much more money. So let's come up with another stretch goal for the next $10,000. And a lot of them we kind of thought up on the spot. Hey, let's put more art in the book. Or,
Hmm.
oh, we'll do a chapter on this. And it was creating additional material. And that's one of the traps that we see a number of Kickstarters fall into is they don't have everything planned out ahead of time. They get caught up in the moment during the Kickstarter and they end up adding things that they don't fully think through and probably shouldn't have done if they would have thought it through ahead of time.
I mean, I think it's hard though. Like it was beyond your expectations, right? And all of a sudden, this thing is like on fire, right? You're getting tons of comments and people are checking it out. And I think it's kind of normal. Like in that situation, you're going to kind of have a little bit of logic run away from you, right? And kind of
Oh
get
yeah.
caught up in the moment a little bit there.
Well, we had a lot of longtime fans of the world of Glorantha that because it was created in 1966 and it's one of the older fantasy gaming worlds out there. And the game was first created as a role playing game in 1978 for the world of Glorantha. And so we had a lot of fans who had a lot of great ideas of like, hey, we'd love to see this in the book, or oh, could you
Mm.
write more about that? Or this is always one of these great unknown secrets that we want to know more about. And like I said, we got caught up in the moment of, yeah, we can write something on that and add it in. And it was an event that the community was so excited about what was going on. People have been waiting for this kind of material to get published for sometimes decades. And so being longtime fans ourselves, we went right along with the ride, but we were the ones that were making a lot of decisions, not just making suggestions.
Got it. Yeah. So I guess one tip would be to be deliberate about your stretch goals and also, like you said, making sure that you're not pleasing everyone necessarily, but being selective, right, with the things that you incorporate into the
Oh, you,
project.
you if you go into a Kickstarter saying we want to make everybody happy, you can't do it, and you're probably going to do some things that you're going to regret. That's for sure.
So after you do this campaign, the second one, like, had you ever thought of like doing your own company, or was this kind of like a side gig for you when you had your job? Like, what part was this playing in your life at that point?
Well, I worked at an automotive company for 25 years, from when I graduated college up until I took the job with Chaosium in 2015. And so role playing games and publications and I started out doing the layout for a role playing game magazine called Tales of the Reaching Moon back in the 90s. It was always a very fun hobby that I raised a little bit of extra money with. And over time, the projects just slowly got a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger, but it was always nights and weekends or on vacations doing this kind of work. And I set up an LLC with a few friends to do it a little bit more professionally. We wanted to, do it by the book, so to speak, versus just
Winging
ad
it,
hoc
yeah.
projects. And so it grew into a regular side business. But in terms of a full time job, that was when I joined Chaosium in 2015.
And for you, what do you think allowed you to make that kind of a leap? Because going from working in automotive is like a completely different industry, right? So do you think it
Oh,
was like the time that you spent learning about the process, or was it your experiences with the Kickstarters? What do you think led to that leap?
it was a combination of factors. It was definitely doing the Kickstarters and realizing that there's enough money to get a decent income out of it, and that I had enough experience where I was comfortable taking it on as a full time thing. And it was also just circumstances where, the opening with Chaosium came up at a time when I was looking for a change in my life. I was tired of being a help desk manager and a corporate trainer. I enjoyed a lot of the bits of my job, but I was writing computer manuals and help books for computer systems. And so it did help me with desktop publishing and learning Adobe Creative Suite and things like that. And got me very good at document creation. But just all that experience just made me have the confidence to take that leap. And of course, having a supportive family, that made it easier as well.
How would you say this new job, I guess use the word job or this role kind of compares? Like, do you find this to be more rewarding? What aspects of it do you kind of connect with aside from just being able to do projects?
Well, as the president of Chaosium Inc., I am mainly a production manager because, like a lot of companies, you hear the phrase, we all wear a lot of hats, and that's definitely true at Chaosium. We have about 20 full-time people on our team, but we all have to dip into various activities depending on where we are with publishing certain projects. And so, but one of the focuses of my job is on book production. And because I've been a long time collector and player of these games, I'm kind of put in charge of bringing back older titles, either as print on demand or through events with a Kickstarter. And I really enjoy that. I like seeing a book become reality. I usually get involved in most of our projects, our regular publications for our Call of Cthulhu or RuneQuest or Seventh Sea games when they're ready to go. The art is basically done, all the writing and copy editing and proofreading is done, and it's time for the book to go through layout. And that's when the production team that I oversee, we get involved with each project. And it's great seeing all these bits and pieces become an actual final printed, often full color hardcover book. Or like with Call of Cthulhu Classic, where I got to be in charge of recreating the same pretty much exact box that was used that we had in print since 1983 is when we stopped doing box sets.
Yeah,
So,
it looks super cool for sure. Just going down
although
the
we are
page
making
here.
the box sturdier, that's the only real.
That's always a plus.
They're very flimsy. You get a lot of blown out corners, and especially when you're talking with collectors and people who like to have something last quite a while, they're certainly thrilled that they're going to get a box that's almost 3 times as thick as what it was back in the day.
In moving from being like a project manager, individual creator to now being a leader, right? Because you have 20 people working under you and you have to coordinate all of that. You have to lead them. You have to have a common vision, right? Tell me just one tip, maybe, or one thing that you learned about doing that, coordinating people. Is it really just the nuts and bolts of it? Is it making sure that you're aware of the different assets people bring to the table and like all their different skill sets? What's something you've learned about leadership you think you could share?
Well, leadership is getting the right people in the right place in the company and being available to support them, but also empowering them to take the initiative and do things themselves. And at Chaosium, we work in small teams. We all largely work from home. We don't have a central office where we all go to and meet in person. So we're all working from our home offices, and we're online all the time, communicating either through Slack or things like this on Skype or Zoom meetings. But one of the strongest things we try to do in Chiasm is give people a fair sense of take the initiative, get things underway. We're there to support you, make sure you have all the tools and resources you need, and just fostering that independence and initiative. That's probably what I certainly enjoy, that working with people who are very motivated. They love this. It's kind of their dream job. Some of us like to joke that we kind of ran off and joined the circus as opposed to having what you call more mundane day jobs. And so it's working with these small teams that it's a real pleasure, especially because people are really into what they're doing.
Yeah, and I think for beginning creator, that's always a bit of a surprise because I look at your project, right? You got like 3,500 plus backers, massive funding here. You still have time to go. You still got a bunch of almost 2 weeks. You think a lot of the time like one person did all of that, when in reality, there's this whole team that's been orchestrated and organized behind it, right? To be able to produce the art, the graphics, the copy, like all that stuff. If you're worried about the fulfillment and shipping part of your Kickstarter campaign when it comes to getting out all those perks and rewards to your backers, rest assured, I've put together a complete Kickstarter fulfillment and shipping checklist for you, and it's free. This is sponsored by the folks at Fulfillrite, and they thought that you should have this checklist as part of your arsenal going into a crowdfunding campaign. If you want to get instant access to this checklist and it's free, you can go to fulfillrite.com/checklist. Again, that is fulfillrite.com/checklist. Fulfillrite.com/checklist. Just go to that link and you can download it immediately.
Yeah. With the Call of Cthulhu Classic, we're in a little bit of a different situation in some ways because we were taking existing materials because we have mint or almost mint copies in the archives going back to all of our products, going back to the beginning of the company in 75. And so with this project, we really didn't have to have artists creating art or writers writing new things. It was more my small team of people who were scanning in the original products, getting those recognized and created into OCR'd into text files in Microsoft Word, and then cleaning up the art in Photoshop, and then having layout people take the art and the Microsoft Word files and put them into InDesign and create it. So actually, for the most part, all of Call of Cthulhu Classic, which is a little bit of a unique situation, it was done by 3 people, plus, of course, all the marketing and support people behind us.
For sure, for sure. So it looks like one of your takeaways here was just kind of having added value. I was kind of curious what you meant by that. What do you mean by the word value, and like, what does that word mean to you in relation to the campaign?
In this case, we wanted to make sure people felt they were getting good value for their money. A lot of people really want this classic product, but the only way they could get it before this Kickstarter is bringing it back into print was to go onto the secondary market, either used game dealers or auction sites and things like that. And you could easily pay for that 2-inch just rules box set. You could pay $200 if it was in pretty good condition. And a lot of people feel it's just not worth that. They're happy to get it, but they want to feel they're getting value for money. And of course, because stretch goals are a part of most Kickstarters, we wanted to make sure that they felt that they were getting just a little bit more value every time a stretch goal came out without making them spend any more money. Because we haven't added anything in terms of, oh, here's another thing you can purchase. It's just you're getting a little bit more in the box that adds more value to it and makes you feel you're getting a pretty good deal.
And when it comes to that, like that word value, when it comes to tabletops and card games and board games, is that just like more gameplay? Is that better artwork? Is that more pieces? Like, what does that word mean to you, value, when you're like, I want to add more value into it?
It's a combination of those things. And of course, different customers are going to see it a different way. But for me, it's we want to have a quality product. Like I mentioned earlier, we're making it a much sturdier box, and people really value that. I was surprised when we did our Call of Cthulhu starter set just a few years ago, and I decided I wanted to go with what we call the bomb-proof box. And we went with a box that is 2 or 3 times thicker than most other game boxes. And we actually got a lot of positive feedback from a lot of customers, even when they were just looking at it in one of our convention booths, Gen Con or Origins or things like that. They'd pick it up and they'd hold this box and they'd be like, wow, this is a really quality box. This is valuable to me. And so it's quality components. And so we really have been focusing on a lot of production values, as we call them, and using the right stock, a nice paper, has a nice feel to it. It makes them feel that they're getting more value for their dollar.
It's almost a little bit of branding too, because then they associate that quality with you guys. Yeah, so it's a byproduct of branding, kind of.
I know one of the things when we started, because a number of us came on board in 2015. Actually, 3 of my business partners, we all came on as the management team in 2015. And we all kind of divided up the management responsibilities, be it financial things or production related, marketing related, creative side of things related. And across the board, we wanted to address quality, production quality in particular, because for most role-playing games in particular, there's a set expectation of a 256-page hardcover book is going to be within a fairly narrow price range. And if you charge more than that, people are going to think they're getting ripped off. And if you charge less than that, besides being very hard to make money, a lot of people feel, well, if it's that cheap, it must not be very good. And so, but Chaosium, unfortunately, had been going with very simple black and white interiors for probably longer than it should when the industry had gone to full color. And we were doing mainly soft cover books when most of the industry had been moving toward hardcover books. And we felt we had to catch up on our production values and our quality, or we weren't going to be able to be competitive, especially on the shelf in a game store. And so we focused on just across the board, all the things we did related to quality so the customer feels they're getting really value for their dollar. because there are so many other role-playing games people can buy out there. And if someone has maybe, $50 every few months they want to spend on role-playing game books, we're competing with a lot of other companies, and we have to definitely look good next to them on the shelf.
Yeah, for sure. One of the other things that kind of ties to that I think is actually really interesting is one of your takeaways is this idea of like simplicity versus adding in lots and lots of value. So when is like the scale tip where you have too many bells and whistles and it's too complicated and it almost turns people off? Like what role does simplicity play, would you say, in the campaign?
Well, we almost had that problem with our Guide to Glorantha Kickstarter, where we were offering too many things and people were trying to figure out which backer level was best for them, which set of rewards. And we ended up coming up with a table of like 20 columns and then of different rewards you could get, and then the 20 columns of backer levels and having these yes, no's, this is what you're getting. And even that table, which tried to present it simply, caused a lot of confusion and it usually created a lot of questions. And we were always answering, I don't know what to back on your Kickstarter. And a lot of people, if they just get confused, they figure these people aren't very organized, they don't know what they're doing, and backers would drop. And that also was very, very true on the Horror on the Orient Express and the Call of Cthulhu 7th edition Kickstarters, where they just had too many of these add-ons you could buy and combinations of reward levels where it just added so much complexity that it does, just like you said, really turn backers off.
Yeah, I think a confused person never buys, right? Because they're like, oh, am I missing out on the deal? Should I get this or that? And it can just kind of create that like analysis paralysis a little bit.
Yeah. And so you mentioned a tipping point. We certainly, with Call of Cthulhu Classic, I wanted to keep it really simple. We didn't want to focus too much on options. And so in some ways we're experimenting with a super light series of options here where really, other than some digital only levels, you're really talking three basic things you can choose. We have a simple 1-inch box full of just the rules because some people just want the early rules set. We have a bigger 2-inch box that's full of not only the rules, but a bunch of supplements. And then we have a very limited edition, signed and numbered kind of designer's edition signed by Sandy Peterson. And one of the reasons we did that is because they had that back in the day when the game first came out, where Sandy hand signed and numbered 200 copies. And so we wanted to bring that back for the 40th anniversary of what he did back then. And so, but there's really only three things. And so we're still experimenting with Kickstarter a little bit. And this time we wanted to experiment with, we're just going to keep the add-ons and all that as simple as possible, not have a lot of SKU combinations to have the warehouse get potentially confused on. And so really it's just those three rewards. And in some ways it's only really two in terms of production.
For sure. And when it comes to this game also, I mean, you guys do, like I said, have really beautiful artwork. It looks great just scrolling down the page. So you've definitely done your homework when it comes to that, and it looks awesome. One of the quick questions I had for you actually when I was scrolling down the page is I've noticed, I'm sure you'll remember this back in 2012, a lot of people would bake shipping into either the price or they would collect it on Kickstarter. And now there's sort of this new, I guess, technique or strategy of collecting it afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on that? And is that useful?
We find it very useful because with the Guide to Glorantha, shipping costs in particular was one of the things that really stung us. What happened is we had to write a great deal of material for the Kickstarter based on all those stretch goals. When I was saying, oh, write us a chapter on this, and oh, can you write more on that? And so we turned a 400-page book, which is a pretty big book, into two 400-page books. And we had already locked in what we were going to charge to ship it, because once you set up a backer level and somebody backs it, you can't change the dollar amount or anything. It's all locked in. And that's just how Kickstarter works. And it's something to be very mindful of. But so we were forced, based on what we had said, well, we're going to charge you so much for shipping, that was locked in. But then it took us, 2 years to write all the content. And the United States Postal Service in particular had several very large increases in their shipping rates. And so what was reasonable, because we had done, I shipped a lot of packages before we did the Kickstarter, just individual books and all that. So very used to what it would cost to ship it. But we didn't expect, I in particular didn't expect to have shipping costs go up 50% over those 2 years for what we were trying to do, especially international shipping costs. And so we lost money on the shipping. Fortunately, we had made enough on what we were charging for the books that we could absorb that shipping loss, but it turned what I would call relatively profitable Kickstarter into a break-even Kickstarter.
Yeah, I mean, that's also one of those things you don't think about. And it's kind of like you think it's a fixed cost, but it's actually a variable cost, right?
It can be. And also because there are so many destinations you can ship to, and especially if you're going to have a lot of international backers. And so we decided to go with BackerKit. They're our fulfillment manager, where we set up everything in there. They have a number of tools that help with shipping and creating shipping lists and things like that. But also, we decided we're going to charge actual cost shipping much closer to when we're going to ship the game. And that means we do it in BackerKit. And we just make sure to state it up front. And with the Guide to Glorantha, it took us several years to get the books ready. But with this Kickstarter, we have all the books basically ready to go now. And so we know that we're going to be printing this in late July. We know we're going to have that all done in time to get it shipped out in September, October. And so we know that, okay, we're going to be shipping it this year. We know the United States Postal Service rates aren't going to change because they always change in January every year if they're going to go up. And so we've been preparing for how we're going to ship it. So we have pretty good cost estimates, but still, just as a fail safe, while we can give an estimate, the actual final shipping cost we're going to be doing in BackerKit.
Yeah, it definitely makes it a little bit easier to forecast that way for sure. I just have one or two more questions for you here. So one of my questions really was on the marketing side, which is having this illustrious history with the company and also having a great fan base. How do you guys think about marketing? Like, is this just something where you announce it and people kind of just show up? Or is there preparation that goes into doing a launch like this to attract so many people, thousands of people to this campaign?
The thing with marketing from my perspective is you can always do more. And either you have a real passion for it, or you can be like me. I don't have a strong passion for it. We have a marketing team that has the passion for it. And I'm glad we left it to them. But it's hard to do too much marketing. And so between our Facebook pages for Call of Cthulhu and Chaosium, our Twitter account for Chaosium, and we also have a dedicated mailing list that you can sign up for on our website on chaosium.com. It's called our Ab Chaos newsletter, where we have thousands of people who subscribe to that. And we just make sure they know about these things are coming. We want them to help spread the word. And a lot of our fans are very happy to help spread the word to various forums and Reddit and places like that. That we want to get the word out, but not too far in advance of when the Kickstarter is going to launch, because we want that, hey, it's coming soon. And it's get that anticipation and excitement. And it's not like, oh, it's 6 months from now.
Yeah. Yeah. There's almost that feeling of like a gift is coming, or there's going to be this huge event that's happening. And I think that's honestly the reason you said you went with Kickstarter in the beginning anyway, which is to create that kind of event feeling. So my other question there when it comes to that is, so you guys have this massive audience and you guys know what they like by now. For people that are listening, who do you think would be interested in checking out your current project here? And what kind of vein does that fall in? And where can they go to learn more about your campaign?
We have a few audiences that we specifically had in mind when we set this one up. The number one audience, it is part of the nostalgia market, where there are a lot of people who got into role-playing games in the 70s and 80s, and this is a game they played back in the day, and maybe their parents threw it out, or it got lost among many moves between high school or college or first job, second job, whatever, and they'd like to relive gaming as it was back in their youth. And so we definitely had them in mind when we set this up. But we also have a lot of people who started playing the game after these things went out of print, and they are collectors and want to have earlier things that are out of print now, but they don't want to pay collectors' prices. So we had those collectors in mind as well. And then we also have the current players that we were mindful of, that One of the nice things about Call of Cthulhu in particular is that the rules system, even though we're on currently the seventh edition of the rules, which 7 editions in 40 years, that's not too bad. But the game is very backwards compatible. And so current players of the game who might be hesitant from some other systems, well, why am I going to go back 4 or 5 editions of the game? It's changed too much since then. With Call of Cthulhu, it really hasn't changed that much, where you can pick up one of these adventures and you can run it with the current rules quite easily. And so we're trying to definitely market to the current audience as well.
Very cool. And where can people go to learn more about the campaign and the other things you guys have going on?
Well, Chaosium.com is always the best place to start. We have a regular blog and we post on there about upcoming things. And of course, subscribing to our Ab Chaos newsletter on our website. That's just one of those, type in your email and we're happy to mail you about once a week with the latest and greatest things that are going on. And also, for Call of Cthulhu in particular, we have a very active Call of Cthulhu Facebook page where a lot of players and keepers, and they're all there. And we always are announcing things fairly early there as well.
Got it. Awesome, man. I appreciate you coming on. My final question for you is if you could speak directly to the listeners, and we can end on this note, if you have a final tip or a word of encouragement for someone who's just launching their first or their second campaign, what would you tell them, either a final tip or a word of encouragement? And we can end on that note.
Kickstarter is a wonderful way to do a project, especially if you're not sure how big your audience is going to be, because you will know how big your audience is at the end of your Kickstarter with the number of backers. But it does take preparation, and you want to be realistic and plan things out and not just take it as it comes after launching it in Kickstarter.
Well said. Rick, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it and look forward to watching your remaining 10 or 11 days here.
Well, thank you, Salvador. It was a pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. Again, my name is Salvador Briggman. Thank you for joining me here today. I do value your time. It means a lot to me that you are investing in your own education, and that also you're kind of tuning into, honestly, what's current right now when it comes to doing a Kickstarter campaign. And that's like so important. I can't tell you just the number of people that have outdated mental frameworks. You know what I mean? It's like that person who maybe was really in the know when it comes to design or when it comes to music, and then they talk about what's current and like it's not current at all, right? So it's not only about, for me, like the classics. Like I love the classics. I've been in the industry since 2012. So like I love talking about those classic Kickstarter projects. I love talking about the things that work that we've discovered early on, the things that I've also put into the Kickstarter launch formula, etc. I love going over that. Those are the classics in my mind. But you also got to pay attention to the new trends, right? Otherwise, things become outdated. And you might be doing stuff that worked a couple of years ago that don't work today, right? So you always got to have one eye on what's proven, the foundational elements, that kind of stuff. In the same way, if you were studying a subject, let's just say that you're trying to become like, I don't know, a chemical engineer, you'd study the bedrocks of chemistry, right? But then also you might learn about some cool new stuff like nanotechnology, right? Which I find just fascinating. So you got to have an eye on both of them. And that's really what I try to accomplish with this show. Without you having to hunt through all the information, you can just relax, sit back, tune in, and get all this and just download it down to your head, man, right? That's really the whole purpose of this show. Now, some of you want to take more action and you want to take it fast, or you want to at least get even more personalized attention from me. So there are two ways to do this. I'm going to share both of them in just a second. So the first way is to book an individual coaching call with me. Typically, people do this when they're interested in either long-term coaching with me or for me to work on their project in some way. I obviously can't work on every single project, but they really want like a serious consideration there. If that sounds like you, and you also have the budget to invest in your project, into your business, into what you're doing, this might be a good option for you. And you can check that out at crowdcrux.com/coaching. That link is crowdcrux.com/coaching, crowdcrux.com/. The other link that I think is really relevant is if you're more on the side of like, I'm just kind of gathering information, right? I just want to know more. And I also do want access to Sal. Like I do want to do check-ins with Sal. I also want to gain access to his insider community. I want to see all of the live workshops that he does every single week, as well as all of the private training modules and lessons that he's collated over time, tactics, worksheets, checklists, all that kind of stuff that makes things easier, right? When you're doing a process or you're running a Kickstarter campaign. If that sounds like you, then you might like my Smash Your Kickstarter Goal community. And really the whole reason why I started doing this is to democratize information, make it easy for you, right? But also give you a little bit of access to me as well. So I think that's so important, but I also think that you have to be willing to invest in your own education, in your own knowledge, in yourself. And if you're gonna be doing any kind of process, let's just say you're doing something really big, like you're buying a house, right? What are you gonna do if you're buying a house? Well, you're gonna consult a lawyer, you're gonna consult a realtor, you need an inspector, right? You have all these people that are part of that process so that you can make a good decision. Same thing goes with other areas in life. If you're trying to do something big like buying a business, right? You're obviously gonna consult a lawyer, you might have a CPA or an accountant look over those financials, you might have a mentor who's telling you whether or not this is a good industry to go in, right? You might have some other people that are helping you out. So when it comes to important decisions in life, it's so critical to invest in yourself to make it easy for you. And then you surround yourself with not only useful people, but also that information that you need to make good decisions right at your fingertips. Does what I'm saying make sense? Does this make sense to you? Because that's why I created this community. So if that sounds interesting to you, you can go to the link crowdcrux.com/mastermind. That link is crowdcrux.com/mastermind, crowdcrux.com/mastermind. There's so many different things I think in life. It's really interesting to look at some of the industries that we're a part of. If you're going and trying to become fit, you obviously hire a personal trainer. If you're trying to improve in other areas of your life, you want to grow when it comes to your personal finance, you might even hire a financial planner, right? These different industries are there to help you. They're there to improve the decisions that you make. And crowdfunding is super new still. Like, I mean, you can argue the date of when it started. You might say it started a lot earlier than when Kickstarter or Indiegogo actually came into the picture. If you wanted to, I believe there's a case for that. I think patronage actually goes up back many years, right? Or even thinking about the ways that old school crowdfunding happened, right? And you can look at the artistic work, right, in like churches, and because they had the money to be able to pay artists, and that's why obviously so much art is made around that. So you can make a huge debate. But I'll say, at least for me, I've been in the industry since 2012, so it's been about 9 years or so. And I think the industry has grown a lot, but one of the areas we need to continue to grow, I think, is in really holding people's hands throughout this process, and that's what I try to do. So again, link crowdcrux.com/mastermind. Hope you enjoyed today's podcast, and I will see you next time.